Good, good afternoon. My name is Joe Bandel. I am the last Rosicrucian. Now, this is my weekly video trying to just give updates on what's going on in terms of Gaia's ascension, things like that. And it's fairly interesting because last night I had a very interesting dream that really helped click some pieces together. Now, that's what a lot of stuff is about, is really trying to, we get insights and little pieces click together that hadn't clicked together before. And we have deeper understandings of what's going on. So this particular thing that happened last night was actually a lucid dream, where I was actually aware that I was dreaming within the dream. But what was interesting, and this is a first time experience really for me, because a lot it's over the years it's been quite rare that I would have a dream in which the landscape or the environment was really extensive. A lot of times the dreams would be kind of minimalistic. And in a way, well, I'll kind of describe what this dream was. There were like high spots. The ground, there was like some high spots, maybe a cliff here or there. And then there were low spots that were like going down into a valley, and high spots. And there was even more interesting, there was like a university. And it was like I was a student or whatever out of this university, and the beginning of the dream was leaving that university grounds and going out, and somehow I had to go down in the valley or a few valleys, whatever, and reach some distant destination, and then turn around and come back to the university is kind of what it was. That was, but what was interesting was, so I would be like in a spot where I could observe, and it was like a wilderness, almost like, well, trees, things like that. It was a very nature-oriented dream in that way. But whenever I would like be up at a little bit of an altitude and I could look down into a valley or something like that where I was supposed to go down into, when I would go down into that valley, things got a lot more personal, if you will, and more symbolic. For example, and I can only say that I remember going down into a low area, and there I would be looking through rows and rows of shelves that were on a wall someplace, and there was items that you would find that had been placed there, and you could rummage through or look through, you could pick through a lot of these particular items, and if there was something that you thought was valuable or whatever, you could collect it. You could pick it up and collect it. And there was lots of people down there. And I talked to, it seemed like I was talking to different people or whatever, but the conversations were not really significant in that particular way. Everybody was just kind of busy at what they were doing, and I would go into one area and I'm like, well, this isn't really where I want to go. I want to go over to some other area. And how do I get there? So there was kind of a feeling of being, I don't want to say lost, but it's kind of like you're in unfamiliar territory and it's like, okay, which direction? I wish I had a compass. Because I remember thinking in the dream or vision or whatever, it sure would be nice to have a compass. Because what would happen was I'd have to climb up out of the valley, whatever, to see where I was at and to see where I needed to go, and then go back down. And each time I would go back down into an area, the area was different than the previous area. So they were like little realities. You could say they were like timelines. And I remember just kind of wandering around, kind of exploring one of these or wandering into one of these and then saying, well, this isn't it. I've got to find my way out of here. How do I find my way out of here? And it took me a while to figure out that to get out, you go up, and then you come back down. You come down and you get into it. These things. Once so my brain wasn't working completely the way it would normally, because it was kind of difficult to figure that out. But after I had up and down and wandered around enough, I went, oh wow, I get it now. So I was learning for the first time, learning how to navigate these little pockets, if you will, because each one seemed to have its own reality or its own, let's just call it its own little reality. And you could go in there and each one, you could wander around and maybe you'd find something worth picking up or collecting, and maybe not. And maybe you'd meet somebody, but maybe you wouldn't. And after enough time, then I was like, oh, look at, and I could see in the distance, I could see, it was getting towards sunset, and I could see the city, or it was like the college campus that was all lit up. And it was like, that's where I needed to go. And so the dream switched from me wandering away from it to heading back to it again. And I'd never in my life have I had a dream like this. But it seemed to just go on and on forever, because most of my dreams are kind of like something happens and there's an energetic contact or a breaking or whatever, and then the dream is gone. But this just persisted and persisted. And I was like, wow, this is definitely kind of interesting. And in looking back on it and thinking back on it, what I realized was, for the first time, I was like astral projecting at a level that was just skimming over the top of this environment, this ground, and dipping down into these different timelines. I dipped down into this timeline for a little bit, and I would kind of be figuring it out, whatever, and I'd come back up and I'd move over and go down again, the same thing and come back up. And that, so that I was out of body and I was aware definitely of that little boundary between, oh, I'm on top of everything here and I can see where I need to be. And then you go down and you go into it and everything gets kind of, it shifts a little bit because you're going into a timeline, and that timeline is becoming what you see. It's like the channel. It's like selecting a channel, I could say. And it was fascinating, really, because typically, a lot of times I function at all the levels of the plane, but my experience is not heavily environment oriented. In other words, I can project, or I can like remote view or something like that, but a lot of what I pick up on is typically more symbolic than it is environment oriented, where you're able to walk around on it. So it was extremely symbolic because of that, because I was actually, I'm in a physical body and I'm walking around in these places, and it's kind of a wooded area, a nice area, whatever, and then you go down a little bit. There was actually a couple like cliff or ravines that's with drop-offs, but you could walk around them. You'd find a path, something like that. So it was really that boundary, I guess. And it made me realize that typically my out-of-body experience is higher than those. It's up there where I just kind of go wherever it is. I track something down in the astral plane and connect with it, find out what I need to find out, and I'm kind of done with it. I'm not wandering around, basically, and wondering about things and getting insights into things like lucid dreaming typically does. So what it really meant was a definite shift and an ability also, because it was opening up a new ability to me, and it helped me to understand more about the astral planes itself, because it reminded me of some of these books, like the book like Astral Dynamics, which is a book about astral projection. It's talking about how the astral planes themselves are created, or how they function, according to the person who wrote the book and was doing, did a lot of astral projecting in an environment, in a deep environment, which made me realize that depending on the height you are, the higher you go, the more symbolic, obviously, that your astral projection is going to be. The lower you go is going to be the more realistic that things are going to be. And there's a lot of interesting things that I remember about this dream, because they reminded me of previous dreams that I had. Because each time I would dip and go down into one of these low areas, I would have experiences that kind of reminded me of dreams. But then I'd be able to climb back out of them. Whereas the dreams that I would remember, or the dream experiences that I had, I wouldn't know how I got to that point, and I wouldn't know how I left that point. So my awareness was hanging in, and it was persisting as I would go down into this area and then pop back up. And so in other words, it was developing a skill that I had not really perfected before. But it kind of told me how important it is. How can I say this? Every energy center in the body, every chakra center, has a potential astral body that it can create, that you can use if you have developed it. But it is so important that you develop a specific one if you want a specific thing to do. If you are really focused more on some of the higher energy centers, like the pituitary or the pineal gland, even the throat chakra type of things, you're going to have really not a very strong environment oriented type of thing. You come down to the thymus area, or the heart, the high heart area. That's that sweet spot where the brain kind of can tag along with the heart. That's where it's kind of like the spot that works well. It's a sweet spot because you're able to be in the emotional levels of the astral plane, but bringing your mind along with you to a certain degree. And if you're projecting, for example, out of the solar plexus area, it's going to be very, you're going to be in an environment, and you're going to have to find your way around that environment. You're not going to be able to pop out of it and pop back into it, I guess is what I'm saying. In other words, this is my first-hand experience of kind of messing around with these things and realizing what's really happening. Now, that's exciting. And it's exciting because typically what happens at the higher levels is going to try to filter down to the lower levels until it physically manifests. And what's happening is globally, the ascension energies, Gaia's ascension energies, are flushing the shadow out. They're flushing the crap out of our individual system. And what happens is, as each individual encounters that energy and knocks apart or breaks a part of that that shadow self loose, that repressed toxic energy loose, it's going to come up into awareness. And generally, it's accompanied by some physical activity or whatever, that a lot of times you might get sick. You knock something loose, it comes up, it stirs your system, you get sick from it, maybe you get in an accident, something bad happens, that kind of thing. If you catch it early enough, if you catch it at the high, at the top end, then you get chances to neutralize it before it becomes dangerous. But we're at a point in Gaia's ascension where the people who have been working the crown chakra have been doing it for a long time. And it's now, what's happening is the level of activity is down about as low as it can get. It's down into the etheric planes where things are just about physical. And you can sense it happening. You can sense that energetically there is a battle going on in the etheric plane for which way the energy is going to go. And if it goes one way, there's the consequences. If it goes the other way, there's the consequences. And what I'm trying to say, I'm hoping that I'm making myself understood, but it's kind of hard to, the insight that I'm trying to share is kind of hard to say, because people might not understand it the way that I'm intending it. What happens is we are at a point in Gaia's ascension and in humanity's ascension where whatever happens during this battle is bringing physical results. Not in a year, not in 2 years, not down the line. We're at that point where, okay, things are happening. And I'm just going to give an example, whether people like it or not. The election, with Trump being elected, consequences to that. And these consequences are fast. What came in, he was just signed in, sworn in as the president the first day. 200 executive acts signed. Those are physical consequences. Today is Thursday. It's the 23rd of January. It's only a few days after Trump was sworn in. Okay, there's people that are being forced to stay. They're like on administrative leave because they don't have a job anymore. That's how quick it's happening. Or there's people that are being rounded up. And I'm not using this to say right or wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that things are happening in the astral, or more correctly at the etheric level, which is near physical. And the consequences are very severe. And why is all this happening? It's happening because there's been a battle going on for the last 20 years about which way things are going to go. And it started way up here And it got lower, 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 and lower, and lower. And now you can't get any lower. Now there's no spring, there's no shock absorber. That's what's happening. Within the astral planes, there is no longer any shock absorber between what occurs in the astral and what happens in the physical. There's no more shock absorber. So the only thing that you're going to find two kinds of people. One type of person is a person who's been working on their shadow aspect, and they've been purging their own self-destructive qualities. They've been working on themselves, and they have developed an immunity to the new energies that are coming in. And they are going to be okay. Not only okay, they're probably going to benefit from the new energies that are coming in, because their self-destructive tendencies have been faced. They've faced them, they've become aware of them, and they have changed their actions, so they're not being self-destructive anymore. The other kind of person, what's happening now, something's happening in the astral or the etheric plane, and it's having these physical consequences that hurt. And there's nothing that they can do about it right now, because they have waited too long. They can't stop it. This is the point that I'm getting at. I've been giving videos for 20 some years trying to talk about some of this stuff, and work on this while you got a little time. We've run out of time. There is no shock absorber left. What happens if something bad happens now? Deal with it. It's how your attitude goes from that point on. Let's say something happens and you're put in a bad situation. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe there's the car breaks down, or something falls apart in your life. You can't stop these things now. We are at probably the peak destructive period of this whole Gaia's ascension thing, because it's not Gaia anymore. This is humanity's ascension thing. But the natural occurrences are speeding up too. But what I'm getting at is, we are entering this portion of time where the individual cannot do much about stopping what's happening. From this point on, you have a choice of how to deal with what's happened. The events around you, the events that are surrounding you, have crystallized to the point where they're no longer really malleable for the average person, unless you've really been working and cleaning out the shadow aspect, your self-defeating tendencies, and then if you've been doing that, you've preloaded your timeline with good things happening. So your karma is coming back to you as clean karma. That's what's happening. But for everybody else, something's going to be happening, a hardship of some kind. And are you going to get mad? Are you going to fight back? Or are you going to accept it, own it, and try to move on from it? Fighting back is the self-destructive way. That's, I guess that's just what I'm going to say, that it's too late. It's too late for that. Now it kind of comes down to where you just kind of admit you've been wrong and try to make it right, however you can do it. I've gone through bankruptcy twice in my life. I'm not proud of that, but going through bankruptcy was the only way that I could get back on my feet at all. And it had to say, I screwed up. I screwed up. Let me start again. That's where we're at. Again, if you belong to that class of people that have been working on yourself, you've been working on your self-defeating tendencies, you've been doing the shadow work, you're probably going to find a lot of good things opening up for you, a lot of opportunities opening up. But if you're on the other side of it where things are getting really rocky, the best, you just kind of try to just hold it together through a tough time, and try to work on developing the soul, developing the spiritual aspect of things, and try not to get trapped into a reactive, destructive situation that only makes things worse. I don't know how else to say it. It's just that it's too late. Now everything's crystallized around you. What's going to be happening to you is something that you have created for yourself.